I'm Mahdi Shaheeb Sher. My website is www.mahdishaheebsher.com. I think one of my interests in the world as Mahdi Shaheeb Sher is the 2-year Israel war. I think it's 2 years in November that we've had an Israel war in the Middle East. I think it is quite a long duration of time. It's almost 2 years, I think, in November. So I think that an Israel war to go on for this length of period of time shows that there is a problem in Israel, and maybe an aggressive one. I think the last time there was a 2-year war involving Israel was maybe in the 1970s, and that was a very problematic time for Israel and the region. So I think for to be this instance of a 2-year war with Israel is a new development, maybe a new serious development in the Middle East. And if you look at the situation with the Israel war, we've lost almost 100,000 people. I think there's 100,000 dead and 100,000 fatalities. So I think that shows the aggressive nature of this 2-year conflict. 100,000 fatalities, it's almost 1 million. And if it was to go on for 5 to 10 years, then it could reach 1 million dead. So the level of violence and danger with this conflict is quite serious. I think if there is an instance of an Israel war, then obviously the international community need to be involved. I think they need to see what the problems are with Israel. It needs to look at its grievances and to see what the problem is. I think in this instance with the Israel war, it started with some kind of an embassy attack and some kind of an embassy issue involving Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran. And I think the underlying issue is maybe the relationship between Israel and Iran. I think that's the cause of this Israel war and conflict. I think that Israel at the moment is very nervous about the developments going on in the Middle East with Saudi Arabia and its new ruling royal family, with the Yemen uprising and guerrilla insurgency into Saudi Arabia. And then, of course, we have this long outstanding issue of Iraq as well. And I think with Iraq, it's been going on for over 20 years. That's a 20-year war. It's a 20-year Iraq war started by President George W. Bush of America. It's been going on for a very long time. A 20-year war is a very long time to have a war. And I think there's nothing to show for it as well. America has not increased its control or power in the Middle East with this 20-year war. In fact, the region has more instability. I think America has less of a military presence there now than it did before the war. And also there's a lot of fatalities, American fatalities, with incursions by Iranians and maybe Kurds and Turkish separatists maybe, or ISIS, or maybe Syria and Lebanon. I think North Iraq is kind of the breeding ground for some of the insecurity and conflict in Iraq. And I think that's what's driving a lot of the blood and the dead in Iraq. So I think that's one of the issues with Iraq, that it should be closed down and terminated as soon as possible. I think America does need to withdraw from Iraq as it's withdrawn from Afghanistan. So I think that would be a positive development by America to close the 20-year war, put it behind America, and to move on and to kind of get rid of all of this damage and the blood and the death. So that's one of the issues with the region, Iraq. And of course, we've had the 15-year civil war in Syria, which occurred with the Arab Spring about 15 years ago. So we've had a 15-year civil war in Syria with Bashar al-Assad. I have disfavourable opinions about Bashar al-Assad. I think he's an evil dictator. I think he's maybe unscrupulous, but I think that Bashar al-Assad is maybe not the legitimate ruler of Syria. I think he has a big price to pay for the dead involved in the 15 years of civil war that's occurred in Syria. He could have quite easily have resigned and maybe held elections or something. And that would have stopped a lot of the violence and the dead in Syria. But I think to have a civil war for 15 years is very serious, especially when it's so close to Egypt and Saudi Arabia. I think it does threaten political stability in those countries as well. So there's a lot of outstanding issues in the Middle East. And this 2-year Israel war, I think, is provoking the fire. I think Israel has some kind of grievance with Iran. I think it's very threatened by Iran. Iran has made a lot of inroads into the Middle East as a whole region, and I think that's why Israel is nervous about Iran. I think Iran has been quite successful in the Middle East with its military and the Revolutionary Guard, and I think that Iran is quite powerful in the Middle East, maybe to the same level of Saudi Arabia, and that's quite a significant threat for the Middle East. So I think we do have Iran in the Middle East now, whereas it didn't exist in the Middle East before. I think what we had with the Middle East before 15 years ago was Saudi Arabia, and we had quite an influential Iraq, and that's pretty much what we had. But now what we look at with Iran in the Middle East is kind of a lot more of the smaller, powerful countries, smaller countries that have become powerful, influential, like Syria and Yemen. And I think that's partly because Iran has just walked into the Middle East and positioned itself there. I think Israel could have most to suffer for this, because Iran is perhaps Israel's biggest enemy in the world. So I think Israel is rightfully nervous about Iran's power in the Middle East. And I think that's why we're probably seeing such a determined action by Israel with this 2-year Israel war. It's made a lot of progress because of that commitment and mobilization and determination. But I think Israel has dominated Lebanon. It's threatened, obviously, Iran to a very significant level, where Iran has had to withdraw in some humiliation with its tails in between its legs. So I think that Iran has been subdued by Israel in this 2-year conflict. And I think we're seeing maybe Israel become more involved in the Middle East with its 2-year war, and this is of course concerning. So I think that the international community does need to be more involved with this conflict. It needs to mediate and broker peace, and I think a long-term ceasefire is very positive. I think that could be the best way forward. So I think there needs to be more mediation and peace resolve, and hopefully Iran can back off and Israel can perhaps settle down a bit. But I think for there to be an Israel war for this duration of time has caused 100,000 fatalities, genocide in Gaza and the West Bank, I think we've annihilated the West Bank and genocide. And I think maybe Hamas has no good place in this either. I think Hamas could be to blame for a lot of this as well, because Hamas ultimately is organized and supported by Israel. That's where Hamas comes from. It comes from Israel. It's supported, funded and organized by Israel, and it's a terrorist organization as well. So Hamas is never good in the regional conflict and in brokering peace. So I think if we can take Hamas out of the equation, I have disfavourable opinions about Hamas. I think they're no good as an organisation, but I think you can't have peace in Israel or the Middle East when you have organisations, terrorist organisations like Hamas. So I think if Hamas was to be removed from the equation, then there is more chance of peace, and I think things can settle down a little bit. So that's my view about the 2-year Israel war. Thank you.